Welcome back to Real Clear Politics on Sirius XM. I'm Phil Wegmann, RCP White House reporter, and I'm joined now by Washington Democrat Representative Marie Gluesenkamp Perez. Thank you for joining us, Congresswoman.
Hey, very glad to be here.
So you introduced an amendment that would require the House Ethics Committee to develop standards to screen for cognitive impairment. Tell us about the problem that you were trying to address there. And have you seen personally any evidence of any of your colleagues in Congress unable or struggling to perform their duties?
Yeah, so what I hear back home, folks believe that Congress is being run by staffers and not the elected member themselves. And I think it's a very small number of offices where this is called into question. My amendment would not set up testing for everyone. But I was looking through the ethics rules, and I remember as a freshman being kind of terrified of oh my God, the rules are so specific on what kind of baseball hat I can accept. And you can only take food that's not offered you in a toothpick and all this crazy shit. There's nothing in there about how to evaluate an ethics complaint that a member is no longer the one making the calls in their office, that it's their staff. And there's a lot of anecdotal stories. There's a lot of for one, I'm sitting in appropriations committee hearings now, and there's a massive portrait of Kay Granger on the wall. If you recall, she was found living in a care facility while a sitting member of the committee. But it's not that this is about a specific member of Congress. That's not a systemic problem. The systemic problem is that Americans are losing confidence in our government and in Congress itself, and that there is a gap in the rules, that these bigger discussions about what would constitute an ethics violation. We're not looking for just kooky ideas. We're not looking for, somebody thinks that somebody's unintelligent. No, we're talking about, my amendment is really short. It just directs the Office of Congressional Conduct to develop a standard with which to evaluate claims that a member is not reflecting credibly on the House, with unable to execute the duties unimpeded by significant, irreversible cognitive decline. And so that's what we're trying to get at. Not people have all kinds of ideas and all kinds of values, and I believe that voters should be the ones deciding who's in office. I think we should have more information for them to make that determination with. And it does not change the Constitution. There are only 3 ways for a member of the House to be removed. It's you can die, you can lose your election, or 2/3 of the body can vote to remove you. And it's impossible to get 2/3 of the body to agree that the sky's blue. This is not something that's been weaponized in the past. And I think the real risk is the lack of transparency and accountability of the body holding itself to the same standard that everybody else does,
So it sounds like you think the majority of members of Congress could easily pass any type of cognitive test. But have you seen anything? You mentioned former Representative Kay Granger. Have you seen anything there when you've seen a colleague struggle or something doesn't seem to be right?
Well, we've seen look, running a congressional office, you are very, it is, you ought to be you ought to be very focused on how do you orient the body to deliver on the priorities of your district, not policing each other. But I think in these cases where, there's been reporting on several different instances where this has been called into question. We saw it, we also saw it at the executive level during the presidential debates last November. And my constituents had a lot of questions about whether the president was the one steering the ship. Henpecking each other is not the goal. The goal is that this body is loyal to our system of government, that it's candid and honest and transparent with voters. And that, if staff wanted to bring if somebody wanted to bring an ethics violation, there's just nothing to do that with right now. It's just a huge gap in the rules.
And have you seen anyone that you think, if this amendment went forward and became law, that could potentially, face some additional scrutiny? You're there in conference, you're there behind closed doors, you're there at votes late at night. Do you see any of your colleagues, either Republican or Democrat, who have, ceded some of their authority to staff?
Yeah, I think it's a lot of folks who have questions about, you know, it's rare, but you know, when you feel like staff has to continually point to the line in the script for a member or something like that, like that's concerning. But you know, it's not a partisan issue. It's not, you know, and it's not an age issue. Like, I think everybody, we want a representative body. We want people who are, you know, older and experiencing what it's like to, you know, get these like robocalls or like to have, you know, these scam calls, or who are maybe using different kinds of medication that are designed for older folks. Or we want young people. We want people who have kids in daycare. We want people who are from all walks of life. And I think advancing these kinds of rules empowers a stronger body that's more representative and ensures like we are loyal to our communities and not to the status quo, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Your amendment was voted down last month in the Appropriations Committee, and you mentioned that this is a committee that was previously chaired by Kay Granger. I mean, I think that story shocked a lot of people, that for 6 months, a sitting member of Congress was in an assisted living facility. Do you think, and you've already noted that this is a bipartisan issue, this is about good government, not henpecking any individual, but do you think that congressional leadership in both parties is okay with letting someone who is diminished continue in the job so long as it allows them to maintain their power?
You know, I think it's easy to kind of get locked into this like political fight where it's just like, oh, like these are the people who are responsible for like ruining the country. You know, it's like these people. It's like, oh, you know, I own an auto repair and a machine shop with my husband, and like it's so easy to get focused on just fixing cars and getting them out the door and getting the job done right, that you don't work on the business itself and kind of evaluate like, oh, do we need to do some more ventilation projects, or do we need to reevaluate contracts on payment processing or whatever it is? That's a mistake. That is how you lose your business, right? You have to not just do the job that like is directly in front of you, but also have a lens on the business itself, the body itself, the function. And so I understand why it's easier to think about things that feel more time sensitive. But if you don't make room for these larger discussions, you know, you'd go bankrupt. You wouldn't be able to keep doing the thing you want to do, fixing cars, or, you know, passing legislation that makes people's lives better. And so, like, in some ways, I feel like it's important for, especially when things are in such a gridlock. It's like, well, if we can't agree on exactly what, you know, what our tax policy should look like, or how we should address our national health, like we can have conversations about how to have a body that's overall functioning stronger and is better equipped to have those discussions on policy.
I'm curious if some of those conversations aren't happening out in public, are some of them happening in private? Have you had colleagues pull you aside and acknowledge that this is a problem, that maybe staff are taking a little bit too much control, that maybe some of these members are staying on probably longer than they should?
Yeah, people have those conversations, and I think it's also it varies. You know, I think a lot of members might just get that it's common. I think every office has people compiling news clips for them to make sure that you're seeing a spectrum, and often that's done by interns, and I can totally see an intern not wanting to include a news clip about some of these controversies of a colleague. So I think there can be a lack of awareness on all of these things. We do, you know, you do see these conversations in the cloakroom, or, you know, off the floor. And I think that the way to make it not personal and not about an individual member is to have a transparent standard to evaluate these claims, and that's how you kind of get past what could be just gossip and what could actually be real. And I should say, like, ethics committee is different than every other committee. It is split 50-50. It's not controlled by the majority. So it's a committee where these things are much less likely to be partisan. It's a determination coming down partisan. It's also, it does not change the Constitution. Even if they found an ethics violation, they don't have they cannot just remove a member. That would need to come to the entire body, or it's information that would potentially be voted on to go public and be shared with a constituency.
Just a final question here. You've been very generous with your time. There's a lot of new reporting from Jake Tapper and Alex Thompson about President Biden, and you mentioned him earlier. What we've learned is that, specifically his inner circle wasn't just hiding him from the public, but from the cabinet. Looking back, do you share the doubts of your constituents about who is making decisions for the country? And, setting aside personal motivations of President Trump, is an investigation into the Biden auto pen, is that warranted?
I certainly had those. Look, like, I don't view my duty as an elected representative to dip my spoon into kind of elections and campaigning. But when I heard so much concern from people at daycare drop-off or at the grocery store or at church or whatever about who was calling the shots within the elected administration, like that was why I felt like I needed to speak out on that. I haven't looked as much into the auto pen stuff. I think that it's
does it concern you?
What I've heard about it concerns me. I don't know, the timing with all of the, right, was it like we're leaving votes, we're leaving early because they don't want to see this discharge petition on Epstein files come up. Like, I can't say, I'm not a political strategist. I can't say why the auto pen stuff is being elevated now, but I think it's important that we're like transparent and honest with ourselves, and that we're making, we're providing clear information to voters to make these decisions, and not holding up a status quo that's corrosive.